invoice was already signed when I opened the route binder. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. Fuel deliveries don't work like that. Not in 15 years on the job. Stations sign after the drop, sometimes before if the manager's in a hurry, but never hours ahead of arrival. And definitely not with a name I didn't recognize. Harper's Cross. Pump, 2, payment, cash. Someone had written the total in neat block letters, like they were certain how much I'd unload before I ever turned the key. I flipped back through the stack, thinking dispatch had slipped an old ticket into my run by mistake, but the date was today. Printed clean, no smudges, no yellowing. Still, things get weird in logistics. Contracts change hands. Tiny rural stations pop up when a highway reroutes. I wasn't about to argue with a paid stop. I radioed dispatch while the trailer filled behind me, diesel fumes curling silver in the yard lights. "Dispatch, you got a Harper's Cross on my route tonight?" Static hummed for a moment before Carla answered, voice distracted. "If it's in your binder, it's active. Probably one of those legacy accounts. Been a few we forgot to digitize." "Never heard of it." "You don't hear about a lot of places at 2 in the morning," she said. "Anything else?" I almost mentioned the signature, but didn't. Didn't want to sound jumpy over paperwork. By the time the tanks were topped off, the rest of the city had gone quiet. That strange, suspended stillness you only get in the hour when night feels deepest. I pulled onto the interstate with 70,000 pounds humming behind me and watched the green exit numbers tick upward. Harper's Cross was supposed to be exit 214. Problem was, the highway jumped from 213 to 215. I slowed, thinking I'd missed a temporary sign, but the mile markers confirmed it. No construction, no closed ramp, just numbering that skipped like a scratched record. "Probably an old county road they stopped labeling," I muttered. 5 miles later, my headlights caught a small reflective placard half swallowed by weeds. Exit 214, Harper's Cross. The sign looked older than the interstate itself, its green paint dulled almost gray. But the arrow pointed toward a freshly paved ramp. Black asphalt, clean lines, not a crack in sight. Someone was maintaining a road that officially didn't exist. The moment I eased onto it, the radio dissolved into a long, empty hiss. No chatter, no distant truckers, just dead air. In the side mirror, the interstate lights slipped away behind me, swallowed by the dark. And for the first time that night, I had the distinct feeling I'd just driven someplace I wasn't supposed to find. The ramp curved downward longer than it should have, the beam of my headlights tunneling through trees that pressed close on both sides. No reflector posts, no road noise, just smooth pavement and the low diesel growl of the truck. After 3 miles, the forest simply stopped. Harper's Cross sat in a shallow valley like it had been placed there rather than built. Street lamps glowed amber against the dusk, though the last strip of daylight still clung to the horizon. The timing felt off, like someone had flipped the town into evening a little too early. I rolled past the first row of buildings at idle speed. A barber shop with striped paint nearly worn away. A grocery with sun-faded advertisements in the windows. Cars parked neatly along the curb, boxy sedans, rounded pickups, models I hadn't seen outside of antique shows. But there were no people. No movement behind the glass, no crosswalk chatter, not even a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Just as I eased toward the center intersection, a light blinked on inside the grocery. Then another, farther down the street. Then another. They weren't switching on randomly. It spread outward in a slow chain reaction, storefront to storefront, house to house, like the town was waking up because it heard me coming. The gas station sat exactly where the invoice said it would be, squat and square beneath a humming fluorescent canopy. Only 2 pumps stood out front, their analog number wheels resting at 0. I climbed down from the cab, boots crunching louder than they should on the concrete. The air felt warmer here. Still, almost sealed. When I lifted the diesel nozzle, the meter jerked to life, numbers spinning upward in a metallic blur. I hadn't squeezed the handle. I stared at it, certain it would stop. It didn't. Somewhere behind me, a screen door creaked open. I turned. Figures were stepping onto the sidewalk, slow, unhurried, watching in complete silence as the numbers kept climbing. They didn't approach all at once. At first, it was just one man crossing the street, deliberate, unhurried, hands folded neatly behind his back like he had nowhere else to be. Others lingered near the storefronts, gathering in small clusters but keeping their distance, waiting. I set the nozzle back into its cradle, the numbers still ticking upward with a hollow mechanical chatter. "Pump's acting up," I called, more to fill the silence than anything. The man stopped a few feet away, mid-50s maybe, clean work shirt tucked into pressed slacks despite the hour. Something about his clothes felt preserved. Not new, not old, just untouched by time. "It always starts on its own," he said calmly. His voice carried no accent I could place. Flat. Careful. He held out a long white envelope. Payment, I assumed. The paper was thick, almost brittle. Inside were bills so crisp they snapped faintly when I thumbed them apart. 20s, 10s, older designs, much older. "These are out of circulation," I said before I could stop myself. "They were current when we withdrew them," he replied. Withdrew them? Not when we printed them, not when we saved them. Withdrew. I forced a small laugh. "What year do you think it is?" The man studied me with polite concentration. "What year is it on the highway now?" The phrasing landed wrong, like Harper's Cross and the outside world were separate countries. 226, I said. "Same as everywhere." A murmur passed quietly through the onlookers. Not surprise. Recognition. Relief. More people had gathered now, men in brimmed hats, women in modest dresses, a teenager gripping a bicycle with chrome handlebars polished mirror bright. No phones in sight. No one spoke again. They simply watched the truck, eyes reflecting the canopy light with an intensity that made my shoulders tighten. "You've kept the route," the man said softly. "I've never been here." He offered the faintest smile. "You always say that." Behind us, the pump numbers finally stopped spinning. Every head turned toward the sound at the exact same moment. The station office smelled faintly of paper and machine oil, a dry scent that reminded me of places sealed up too long. A single fluorescent tube buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make the shadows twitch. "Receipts inside," the man said, gesturing me toward the counter. No register, no scanner. Just a heavy, leather-bound ledger opened neatly to the next blank line. Except it wasn't blank. My company logo was stamped across the top of the page, an older version we'd retired years ago. Beneath it sat rows of deliveries stretching backward in careful columns. Date, gallons, driver signature. I leaned closer. The handwriting never changed. Same tight slant. Same confident loops, page after page after page. "How long have we been supplying you?" I asked. "As long as you've been coming," the man answered from the doorway. I flipped faster. The dates stuttered strangely, October repeating twice. Entire months skipped. One entry jumped backward 3 years, then forward 10. And then I saw today's date. Gallons already recorded, signature already written. My signature. Not similar. Identical. even the crooked tail on the R I'd developed after a wrist injury. A cool pressure settled behind my ribs. "That's not possible." "You signed when you arrived," the man said gently. "I just got here." On the far wall hung a framed photograph, its corners curled with age. A fuel truck sat beneath this same canopy, the paint scheme older but unmistakable. I stepped closer. Same unit number, same company name. The license plate matched mine exactly. A figure stood beside the truck, arm lifted mid-wave. The image grain hid the face, but the posture, the set of the shoulders, felt intimately familiar. The date stamped in the corner read 1978. Behind me, the ledger page rustled softly. When I looked down again, the ink on my signature was still wet. When I stepped back outside, the town was closer than before. No one had rushed me, no one had spoken. Yet the semicircle of residents now stood only a few yards from the truck, their quiet attention pressing in like a physical weight. "You took longer than usual," the man observed. "Usual?" My voice came out tighter than I intended. "Listen, there's been some mix-up. I've never delivered here." A woman near the pump tilted her head sympathetically. "It's disorienting the first time," she said. "The first time?" I repeated. Several of them nodded. Something inside me shifted then. A deep, instinctive warning that had nothing to do with paperwork or bad contracts. I turned for the cab. "I've got other stops." No one tried to block me. They simply watched as I climbed in and slammed the door harder than necessary. The engine roared awake with reassuring familiarity. I checked the gauges out of habit and froze. Fuel. Empty. That was impossible. The trailer had been full when I pulled in. 6,000 gallons didn't just vanish. My eyes shot to the pumps. The analog totals now sat perfectly still. Zeroed out. Like nothing had been transferred at all. A small knock tapped the passenger window. I flinched. A little girl stood there clutching a faded stuffed rabbit, one button eye missing. "Do you remember the road yet?" she asked. "Remember what?" "The part where it goes away." Before I could answer, every light in Harper's Cross snapped off at once. Not flickered, not dimmed. Gone. The darkness felt immediate and absolute, swallowing the buildings, the pumps, the watching faces. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the truck's headlights dimmed, as if something vast had just begun drawing power from the only thing left that carried any. I didn't wait to understand it. I dropped the truck into gear and drove. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the black as the station disappeared behind me. No street lamps now, no porch lights. Harper's Cross had folded itself back into darkness like it had never been there. The road out should have taken 3 minutes. 5 passed. Then 10. The trees never thinned, the pavement never rose toward the interstate. My odometer ticked upward too quickly, miles rolling past faster than my speed could justify. "Stay calm," I muttered, gripping the wheel harder. Road's just longer than it looked. Then the sign appeared in my beams. Exit 214, Harper's Cross. Relief rushed through me until I passed it, and the forest continued. 2 minutes later, the same sign emerged again from the dark. Same rust along the bolts, same bent corner. My chest tightened. No. The radio crackled suddenly, exploding with static so loud I jerked in my seat. Then a voice pushed through, stretched thin like it was traveling an impossible distance. "Return to your assigned delivery point." It almost sounded like dispatch. Almost. Headlights bloomed in the side mirror, one pair at first, then another. Then several more cresting the dark road behind me. Not speeding, not gaining, just keeping pace, patient. I pressed the accelerator. The engine howled, but the distance between us never changed. The route binder slid off the passenger seat when I took a curve too fast, pages spilling across the floor. One sheet drifted loose and landed near my boot. I glanced down and felt the blood drain from my face. Next delivery, Harper's Cross. Scheduled arrival, tomorrow, 2:12 a.m. The ink shimmered slightly, as if it had only just dried. Behind me, the following headlights remained perfectly steady. Dawn found me still driving. At some point, the forest thinned, the pavement widened, and without fanfare, the truck rolled back onto a familiar stretch of interstate. Traffic hummed past in the opposite lanes. Morning light spilled across the hood like nothing unusual had happened. In the mirror, there were no headlights anymore. No town, no exit sign, just highway. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, hands trembling harder than I cared to admit, and grabbed my phone the second I had a signal. Dispatch answered on the second ring. "Morning, Ray. You finished that run already?" "Harper's Cross," I said. "What is it?" Silence. Keys clacked faintly on the other end. "I'm not showing anything by that name," Carla said. "You sure that's the right town?" "It was in my binder. Signed invoice, cash payment." "Ray, your route only had 3 stops. You hit all of them. No deviations logged on the truck GPS either." My stomach turned. "Check again." "I am. There's no exit 214 on that corridor." I hung up without saying goodbye and walked back to the cab on unsteady legs. The trailer gauge read full. Every gallon accounted for. No broken seals, no transfer records. For a long moment, I just stood there, trying to convince myself exhaustion had twisted the night into something it wasn't. Then I saw the envelope, resting neatly on the passenger seat. I opened it slowly. Inside was a fresh invoice. Harper's Cross, Pump 2. Payment, cash, received. Below it sat another sheet. Recurring delivery confirmed. At the bottom, in the same careful handwriting as the ledger, "Thank you for keeping the route." I don't remember agreeing to come back. But late this afternoon, dispatch assigned tomorrow's run. Same highway, same direction. And when I flipped open the binder, there was a space already waiting in the stack, like a page reserved for something inevitable. I have a feeling Harper's Cross doesn't need the fuel. They just need the road to lead someone back to them. And now that it's found me, I'm not sure it will ever let me take another route. If you made it all the way to the end, let me ask you something. If your route sheet listed a town that didn't exist but was already expecting you, would you make the delivery? Or would you keep driving and hope the road didn't circle back? Stories like this remind us that some places don't disappear. They just wait, quietly, patiently, for the next set of headlights to turn down the wrong exit. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like the video. It tells YouTube to share campfire horror stories with more listeners who love slow burn, atmospheric fear. And if you're new here, subscribe and join the fire. New horror stories drop regularly, all set in remote jobs, forgotten roads, and places you were never meant to find. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you have stopped at Harper's Cross or kept driving? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep the lights on, keep the doors locked, and maybe stick to the roads that show up on the map.